disparities between race, class and individuals within society. Now, the backdrop is a photograph that I took in 2017 from when I visited Grenfell Tower. And I noticed there, it was pretty, you could see the friction between the social classes and people who felt misrepresented and underrepresented within our society. And also how that had an impact on the younger kids, the younger generation, not just the young adults, but the children who had to live within those societies, within those communities. This leading to a photograph that I took in Liverpool. And again, I think you could see the similarities between a social movement, but also the feeling of now there's a responsibility put on the children to be able to vocate and communicate where these disparities create problems within our community. I've said through my photography, I've seen a great responsibility now faced by a much younger generation to be active in means of change. Fragmentation within society, greatly imposed by race and class. We have seen much younger activists being called upon to contribute. Could now be argued children have as much responsibility as adults for communication and development of where our society is to go from this point. And this, I thought, was a powerful indicator of that. As this child was leading this social movement, which affected quite a huge proportion in society, but understanding, this child knew that something wasn't wrong with it, that something was occurring in our society which was wrong and shouldn't be happening. This leading to the later photographs that I took, combination photographs in Manchester, London and Liverpool, where I started to get a feeling of, as an adult, I know life isn't perfect, but a lot of these young children who are having to experience within what my generation and other generation have helped establish, they wish for their life to be perfect. Why shouldn't they be able to experience the best of what life has to offer without having to be discouraged by whether it's race, class, culture or ethnicity of any sort? That I thought the bottom left photograph is a great indicator of that. Just a mother having a moment with a child and completely just in peace, like no problems, no issues or anything at all. And I thought that was just a great indicator of that. But now, I believe now, within a younger, within the younger attitudes of being responsible of where social movements are meant to go, there's almost a coalition between individual movements. When I used to recognise if it was a movement that was exclusively about race or exclusively about gender, it would pretty much be two separate movements. Now we're starting to see like a coalition of those movements, people seeing that there's elements within people who are seeing disparities between race and class which they don't like and wanting to evoke and advocate change for that. So supporting each other. I think the greatest responsibility the younger generation now are displaying is the means of supporting one another in society. And this is from London, Manchester and the likes of Liverpool. It's become more of a community as opposed to this is something that someone is singularly fighting for. And I've seen this was in the Parliament Square in London. So many different attitudes, faces, races who are all coming together, ultimately advocating for the same movement. It was pretty much for just being able to be who they choose to be in society and not be judged for it. And I found that amazing as a photographer to be able to witness and document how people felt all individually or collectively is something I'm quite honoured to be able to do. Leading, to like the last set of photographs that I pretty much have, even though there's still disparities within our society. Like this young girl here from Manchester saying how she didn't feel she was white enough for the white kids and not black enough for the black kids in school. There's still elements which are where problems lie. But ultimately, collectively, I feel like the attitudes are changing and people are doing the best they can to do what they can for generations to come.
So I'm from Germany, so don't bother my accent. And I'm not going to present a specific project, more or less a collection of analog pictures I took the last couple of years, because I personally fell very much in love with the process and the aesthetics of film photography. So I started to take my camera to different occasions and everyday life. Like here, I went canyoning with my best friend, and we wanted to have a picnic in that bay, and he was pulling the canoe onto land, and I was like, stop, freeze, I need to take a picture of this. Because, you know, if you can't say it like that, I like to capture the beauty in the everyday life, kinda. So I can be sometimes pretty annoying to my friends, I guess. But I'm always trying to not have too staged photos and more, you know, capturing the moment, kind of like this. I also started to only take my analog camera with me when I'm traveling, because I enjoy the process much more than having your digital camera and taking 5,000 pictures. You're not really going to look at them again once you're back home. And I feel like if you, at least I do it, if I photograph with my analog camera, I'm much more aware of what frame do I use, and is this picture really worth it to take it or not. So yeah, I also always try to not take the more common travel holidays pictures like on the right, and always try to have more unordinary pictures like on the left, where you can't see the face of the person, because I feel that makes it much more interesting and creates kind of a dynamic. I also like to work with different layers and structures. Like here on the left, you have that beautiful mountain scenery, and in front of it you have that man-made out of batten and metal filter plant in that scenery. And I really like the contrast that it creates, and it makes the picture much more interesting to me. Also, like on the right one, where this man-made building with those kind of bubbles that has like more a flattened structure, and in the background you have that wild rocky mountains. So I like to have some contrasts in my pictures. I also feel like I often can tell like stories to my pictures I take when traveling and doing those film photography. Like on the left, I wanted to take a picture of the scenery because we were on the border between Bolivia and Paraguay, and there were so many people rushing with their goods to the border that they wanted to sell. And yeah, I was already setting in my camera, and then this guy was walking right in front of my lenses and said like, "Hola, señorita, buenos días." So I just had to like snap him right away. And on the right, this was in Argentina, where they have every Sunday like a classic asado, which is basically a big barbecue with the whole family. So they have in their parks like many grills, and so I really liked the picture because the car looked like it was smoking, but it was just a barbecue grill behind it. So yeah, that's kind of what I like to take pictures from my travels. This one was in South Korea, and we were basically just wandering through the streets, and we were definitely not aware that it was the Independence Day on that day. And suddenly we walked into this like mass of people. Everybody was screaming and speaking and waving their flags, and I just, yeah, you know, I just had to take pictures of those people celebrating their independence, and I felt like this was very beautiful. This is the last pictures I'm going to show, and we were hiking in a national park also in South Korea, and like we were halfway through to the mountaintop, and everybody was heavily breathing and super tired already. And then this guy on the right came from the back, basically running next to us with this huge water bottles on his back. And yeah, so we felt like we were definitely not in training like he was. So yeah, I don't know. That's just the way I try to photograph when I'm traveling, like capturing different aspects and yeah, the people of the country also. And yeah, that's it.
So hi everyone, my name is Joe, and I work quite often through a process of trial and error and quite an explorative process. And my work often develops as it goes along. It often relates back to the ideas of home and belonging, and hopefully you'll be able to see that in this project, which I'm going to present to you today, which is titled Sunrise Erased the Blue Moon. Sunrise Erased the Blue Moon explores the ideas of time, reflecting on both its positive and its negative aspects. Having looked at the family album as reference, it looks at these relationships that are in the photographs and builds on them, showing what they've become today. In a way, it looks at what time has given us in preparation for what it may take from us. It's some sort of like a blueprint of time. Before beginning to look at the images itself, I thought it would help to give some contextual aid to the work and look at some main references. On the left, you can see a passage from Freud's On Transient. He uses his text as a metaphor, and he uses the natural countryside as a metaphor for transience. And he basically explains how beauty comes from the fact that things don't last forever. And I became obsessed with this idea, and obsessed with the idea that maybe the love we hold for people is so intense because we know that we don't live forever. And on the right, you can see one of the family album photos on which the project is based upon. Moving on to the work itself, I'm showing the beginnings of the project. As you can see here, there are images from the family album and images that I've taken today. These are used as quite obvious contradictions and comparisons to show the juxtaposition of what time has done to our relationship. Here you can see how the work has progressed, and I did this obvious comparison due to the way that I wanted to portray a more immediate effect with the viewer. So I also removed, as you can see, personal features. I did this as I wanted to make the project a little more universal to everyone. It's a globally shared experience that we all have relationships with ones that we love. And by removing personal features, I thought that the viewer could get in on the work a little more. I also became very intrigued by the idea of the cyanotype process during this project. It was a physical way of working that was reliant on time in the way that I was discussing with these relationships. The longer the time went on, the more intense the image became and the more intense the color became. This, however, did mean that I had to consider what the color blue meant for my project. As you can see on the left, I looked into Yves Klein's work, and this led me on to Derek Jarman's work. Although I don't have loads of time to completely go into this, blue came out as a very emotional color, and it also represented longing and planning. So this was very relevant for my work. Here you can see where the cyanotype process led me, and hopefully this shows the impact that I was trying to show through the process. The timing is reflected in different intensities with the image, and this is a little mini-series found in the work to show that development of time quite literally. I also have a poem from my nan, and I felt this was relevant to include as it itself documents a timeline of events. I felt it was important for me to respond to this poem in my own words, and so I created a poem to include in the project and also printed this through the cyanotype process. Here are some more images, and these are a little bit more detailed and a bit closer up. Images like these are included because I felt it was important that the viewer really understood that there was a play with generations here. I also wanted to amplify that intensity of touch to portray a warmth to my work. So although I couldn't show you everything today, I hope you've got a brief understanding of the work. The work is primarily one to do with love and intensity and the fact that time will take this away from us and what that would do to us. I suppose I'm reminding the viewer to properly relish what we have with others, that there's a transient nature to life and that these relationships won't always be around and that we should cherish them whilst we have them. The work is also displayed as a photo book because I thought it was important that the viewer had physical interaction with the work. As you can see here, I enjoyed the way that the viewer's hands became a process of the work itself. It interacted with the work and had a relationship itself with the work. So that's my time up. I hope you've enjoyed looking at the work. You can find the full body of work on my website, and there's also other stuff on there. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about this project.
Hi, I'm Rosie, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my graduate project called Ad Astra and sort of the process I had in making it. So Ad Astra is about my mum's experience with abortion when she was going through her RAF officer training back in 1990. And it also sort of looks into the discriminatory policy held by the forces between 1978 and 1990, in which they would dismiss any servicewoman from work on the grounds of pregnancy. So that obviously left a lot of women with the sort of ultimatum of either terminating their pregnancy or losing their job. So yeah, I'm just going to scroll through some of the pictures. I was a bit unsure in how to approach this work because it is such a sensitive topic, and I wanted to make sure that my images kind of translated in the right way. So when approaching the work, I made sure that my mum was quite involved with it because she was very happy to help in sort of like any way. So we'd go for lots of walks together, and she'd just talk to me about sort of how she felt at the time and now, and her experience and, you know, her life in the Air Force. And so while we were out walking, I would try and sort of incorporate all these emotions that she had and her thoughts into the images. So while I was the one taking the pictures, it was a collaborative approach because the images wouldn't be what they were without her input. So yeah, we'd take a lot of pictures at the beach because we lived in Cornwall, and she'd always talk to me about how for her water symbolises like healing and the passage of time. So I unintentionally incorporated quite a lot of pictures of water in my work, and didn't realise that until I came to look back, but I think it works quite well with the subject. And so I'll move on to that. So after I took quite a lot of pictures of landscapes. I didn't want to take many pictures of my mum because she wasn't really comfortable in the pictures, and she didn't want anyone to possibly recognise her in case anyone she knew saw the work. But I did manage to find some of her RAF uniform, which I thought would be good to take pictures of to bring more context to the sort of RAF and forces aspect of the work rather than being solely landscapes. So I found some of her uniform in the loft, and actually then put myself into the images wearing her uniform, which I wasn't planning on doing, but I just thought, oh, maybe it'll fit me. And she was quite keen to see if I could actually, you know, what it would look like with me wearing it. So I took a picture of me in it, and a lot of these images I didn't actually end up using in the final edit, but I think it was quite good that I took them because it was really important for me, because I quite literally put myself in her shoes and sort of had an understanding of what her life was at that point, and it helped a lot with understanding the project in general. So yeah, I took some pictures of that. And going back to the landscapes, I wanted to try and show more of what her life was like at the time. All these images so far have been taken in Cornwall, and she had no links to Cornwall while she was working in the Air Force. So I wanted to try and go to places that she actually had links to. So I went to RAF Shawbury, where she spent 6 weeks training to do air traffic control, but I unfortunately wasn't allowed on site, so I sort of hung around the perimeter and sort of tried to sneak some pictures through the fence when the guards weren't looking. But I was actually allowed onto RAF Benson, which is where she spent 2 years of her life working as an air traffic controller. And I'm really pleased I got these images. It was very soon before, I think this was like a week before lockdown, I managed to get them. And I was actually allowed into the control tower, and I think that was really important for the work to actually bring some of the RAF element into it and bring more context to it. And for example, this image on the left of the lady in the tower, I think is quite a significant image in the work, because it makes reference to my mum and also all the other servicewomen who lost their jobs. But at the time when I was shooting, I didn't really consider it. I just sort of took the picture, and now looking back, I'm really pleased I did take it. So this is sort of where I got to with my work. I'm going to round it up now because I feel like I've probably gone over time. But yeah, I've had to sort of put this work on pause because of lockdown. But I'm hoping to carry on with it at some point. It just obviously will take a lot of traveling and getting site access, which is going to be difficult while there are still lockdown restrictions. But yeah, that's a little bit about what I did with the work, and I'm hoping to continue. So yes, that's about it. Thank you.
We've had a few questions in. There isn't the opportunity to unmute yourself because it's a webinar format. So I'm just going to read the questions and put them to the speakers. And probably the one that makes sense to start with is one for Anthony in the chat, and it was to do with, it's from Renee Charles. Do you see differences between how Liverpool, Manchester, London protested? Are there clear differences in the communities, or was the energy the same across the country when you were capturing those photographs?
Can I unmute myself?
Yeah, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. I think every city it has its own unique feel, for sure. It has its own unique feel and its own set of challenges. So in terms of capturing and getting the essence of what that is, it makes it quite unique to its own city. So every city was completely different. But however, the differences pretty much you could collectively challenge like one set of issues. That was whether it was to do with impoverished areas or conversations and issues surrounding class. It was pretty much the same arguments, but each city felt very unique when I was there, for sure.
That is so interesting. Yeah, we could talk a lot about that. And I mean, it's not something that you hear much about, those sort of regional differences, but that's a project in itself, perhaps when it's easier to travel, clearly. But we don't need to travel for today because we're all in a room enjoying it. So that's good, he says, bringing up a stupid point. But I'm going to go straight to the first question in the Q&A that I think only we can see this, but I'll read that out to you, and it's actually from Anonymous. How important is consent to you in documentary photography? Which I think is to Vanessa and Anthony. So maybe both of you unmute yourself, and whoever comes in first that's good. How important is consent?
Yeah, Anthony, go.
Consent. I think when something is happening in that moment, pretty much I feel it's free range. I feel like it's my responsibility to be as authentic and honest as I possibly can. Sometimes within what you're capturing can be unsettling and unnerving for the subject, but I believe there is a responsibility to always tell the truth with the camera, especially in moments of unrest in communities and in society. So I do my best to portray what's genuine and what's real, and try not to dilute actually what's occurring. So that's how I know as a photographer, with my photography, I'm being as honest as I possibly can. There's nothing fake, there's nothing false about that. I think once you start trying to, cater for someone's needs or questioning your own ability, it just affects the continuity of what it is you're trying to capture, and it becomes less.
Thank you. Vanessa, do you want to dive in on that one? The question.
For my part, when I take portraits, I normally always ask the people. I mean, they all look into my camera. The one guy that walked in front of my lens, I mean, like, he walked in front of it, so I just took the picture. I think it's okay for him, but normally I ask the people. Or I take, like, if there are many people, I feel like I don't portray a specific person, so it's legally okay to take a picture of that scenery. Or I take pictures from people from behind where you can't see the face. So that's my kind of like, if I can ask them, I ask them, but sometimes there are moments I just want to capture them and it's like from behind and I like the look, so I feel like I don't have to ask. Yeah.
I thank you very much. I think probably we could ask the others as well on this, and maybe Rosie hanging around outside air bases. Maybe I'm not sure if consent is involved there. I think it's a very different thing for you talking your, having to present the reason why you can be let into places. It's so obviously there is consent, but you still anonymize those photographs, didn't you? Or sort of semi-anonymize them. Rosie?
Yeah, I didn't want, anyone's to be pictured in it really that you'd be able to recognize them. One, because my mum didn't want to be in it, and also I wanted it to be more relevant to the whole, the almost 6,000 servicewomen who lost their jobs. I didn't want it to be pinpointed on a single person. But yeah, as for the air bases, the first one, it was only a picture. There was no one in the picture, so I feel like that was fine. It wasn't showing anything that you couldn't see just from walking along the path, so I didn't feel the need to ask that. And the other at RAF Benson, they checked all my images before I put them online and before I showed it to everyone, so they were happy with them being shown anywhere, so that was all consented.
I think the point that Anthony raises is so important, and there's a lot of, if we had to seek consent for everything, particularly those which are sort of borderline news photographs, it's very difficult. And then there's been so many discussions about how you act in a way, sort of imply if you jump in front of somebody and take a flash photograph, that sort of, people can often be startled, but I think people know you're there, they see what you're doing, you do have that almost unspoken dialogue with your subjects, perhaps, Anthony. So I think it's almost a sort of implied consent, although, as you say, if you stop to ask questions, the picture might disappear.
Exactly. There's always an element of respect there, of course. A photographer, I'm pretty much just trying to recognise distinctively like that moment, and that's what I'm trying to capture.
Incidentally, back to Rosie, the picture, there were no pictures of your mum, that was all you wearing her uniform, is that right?
Yeah, that was me in her uniform, but again, I didn't want to really show my face because I didn't want it to be pinpointed on anyone in particular. But
the idea, that's an extraordinary idea, the idea of a stand-in, and you happen to fit the same uniform, but it's a very interesting, it throws up a bunch of questions about the sort of authenticity of the work, and it has a sort of a broader authenticity, whilst not necessarily being literally true, if you like. Yeah, well, I wasn't even considering doing it at first. It was sort of my mum's idea because she was just genuinely curious to be like, oh, I wonder if you fit in my old uniform. Because actually at the time that she had to wear it, she had just discovered she was pregnant, and I remember her telling me a story that it barely fit her at the graduation. She was really worried that people were going to notice, something was up. So, but I feel like putting myself in it did sort of bring us closer together almost. So it may not be, I don't know if there's authenticity issues, because it's not really, it's a story about lots of people from my mum's point of view, so I don't think it necessarily needs to be based around one person in particular, but yeah. So that's so interesting, thank you. So from Anne Nagayan, my question for Joe, do you take time to be linear or relative? Does a year to you or 10 years feel the same to the other members of your family? Joe, that is a tough one, but see what you can do about that question.
I suppose I would have to say that it's a bit more linear for me, because I do fall in the trap a little bit of over documenting things, and no matter how conceptual a photo it does play a big part in my life as a pinpoint for a moment. And so I suppose for me, I have more of a timeline of images that create a more linear series of events, whereas for a lot of my family, a lot of their memories will just be more memories rather than anything physical to it. So I suppose for me it's a little bit more linear in the sense that I quite literally create this body of work that becomes a documentation of a linear events.
Thank you very much. And there's one more specific question from Beth, and the question is, what question did you use, Rosie? So that's for Rosie. So do you want to speak to that?
What question, as in What do you mean?
I think I'm not sure. Maybe you mentioned. No, I can't quite remember the bit in your talk.
She meant to put camera. What camera did you use?
Oh.
I was going to say I don't remember talking about a question. Yeah, I just used my little Veronica medium format, so it's little and handy to take everywhere. But yeah.
Thank you very much, Beth, for the most mystifying question of the I think that's great. Obviously, type quickly and don't worry about mistakes. We can sort them out later. So there's a question for everyone, actually, from Anonymous. Again, thank you for this. A really lovely set of talks. I guess for all the speakers, what's next? Any upcoming projects coming soon? So should we start in order? Anthony, do you want to start about what's next?
Yeah, I'm currently putting a collection of photographs together. I don't want to say too much, actually, but yeah, I'm trying to centre my next set of photography around families within the Northwest, and pretty much trying to, the nuclear family is identified as the most popular family. So what I'm looking at is how the different families fit in society amongst the nuclear family. So that's going to be taking quite a minute.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony. We've got links to your work, so we can keep an eye on that. And
thank you.
It's absolutely fine if you're just to give us a little hint there. I'm going to hand over to Vanessa. What's next for you?
Well, we also have a lockdown here, so it's not that easy, but my current project is to kinda document a local farm around here for their website. So I'm just taking pictures and videos of a whole year for them to put together for a little image film, and for their website to present how they farm, because I don't know if it's the same in English, biology. Oh god. Okay, so it's, I don't know the word, but it's like they keep their animals outside and not in the stall, and so it's very good for the animals. And so missing vocabulary is definitely a thing.
We talk about free range, but that's not quite what you mean, is it?
No, it's like
organic,
in German we say bio.
In organic farming.
Yeah, organic farming, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. And also I'm planning on taking some portraits of my grandpa, because we all know they're not going to stay forever. So I thought, like, the next time I can go back home, I want to make a series with my grandpa. So that's my plans for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So over to Joe. What's next? What's on your horizon?
I would like to start reaching more people and concentrate a lot more on the networking side of things. But also I thought it would be quite interesting to take another look at the project I presented today, because most of it was taken just in time before the first lockdown back in March 2020. And considering it's a project reliant on a lot of touch and connections and seeing people, it's taken on a new sort of lease of life during lockdown. So I think it'd be quite interesting to sort of reevaluate where that project is situated in today's circumstances as well.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thanks. And finally to Rosie, do you want to talk about what you're doing next?
Yeah, so I'm still going to continue on with the same project Ad Astra at some point, because I had a lot of plans for it before lockdown and it got cut short. So I'm just sort of waiting until it feels right to start that again. But for now, I mean, I've tried to keep taking photographs during lockdown, and I feel like they're slowly forming a theme. But so I'm going to see where that goes. But I have no particular project in mind for now. I'm just sort of seeing where my work takes me.
Thanks, Rosie. And I'm actually going to hand over to Rachel, Redeye's Rachel, who's been just monitoring the chat more closely, just to see if there's any additional comments that we've missed that you want to point out.
Yeah, just thank you everyone for commenting. There's some really, really lovely feedback for all of the panelists. Just saying, beautiful photography, Vanessa. Great images, great presentation, Anthony from Stu. There was a really interesting comment from Mary to Joe saying, just talking about the importance of touch and how it's the first sense that we experience. So she really, really enjoyed your presentation. Really interesting idea, Rosie. Concept of you subliminally reacting to what you and your mum are talking about together along your walks and seeing how it affects what you see through the camera at the same time. Really like that idea, and beautiful work. There was a comment I'm trying to find. Yeah, from Hazel to Rosie again. My mother was a WAAF. I'm not up with the terms, but she had to leave as soon as she got married in the early 50s. And I think from your project, that practice continued kind of very recently, didn't it? Your mum,
Yeah.
Was she in the Air Force?
Yeah, so there was a Sexual Discrimination Act that came in 1978 where, you weren't meant to, fire women from their jobs from getting pregnant or married or anything. But the forces thought they were exempt from it until 1990, but so they continued doing that until people sort of highlighted that it wasn't right. And that's when they finally stopped. So it was sort of illegally still dismissing service women from their roles for quite a long time. I think almost 6,000 women lost their jobs.
Thank you. Anything else, Rachel?
Yeah, lots of warnings from Mike not to take photos in aerodromes and military bases. But luckily you had all the right permissions. And
no, I did get taken around by someone. I didn't just walk in.
I think he's referring to when you're lurking around outside. I mean, it's an interesting thing. It is actually, there are certain buildings that the law is much stronger about whether you can photograph them or not, and they're covered by Official Secrets Act, I think. So it's interesting to study that one, but hey, give it a go. Sorry, I'm not advising that officially.
No,
obviously follow the rules.
Right, so this is my current research project, which is analysing the industrial waste landscape of former Michael Colliery in East Weems and Fife. And one area in particular that's of interest is the Bing that overlooks the River Forth, which separates Fife and Edinburgh. And the project seeks to analyse how perceived waste fragments that once shaped our cultural heritage now provide sheltered habitats for non-human species. So the Bing itself is prone to landslides and coastal erosion, and newly formed mounds of rubble are frequently accumulating at the shore's edge. A significant discovery is the toxicity of the material known as acid rock drainage, and it's caused by the oxidation of iron particles. Rainfall and moisture from the sea accelerate this oxidation. The water from the abandoned mines has the same problem. However, that's pumped to these nearby treatment facilities where it's chemically treated and then pumped out into the River Forth. Unfortunately, the spoil tips remain untreated, and the orange ochre staining that you can see on the rocks are a characteristic of acid mine drainage. As you walk along the pebble beach, the toxicity becomes evident in the colours and poor soil chemistry, and you frequently come across these stones and boulders which have been completely eaten by the acid content. This is looking west towards the neighbouring village, and you can see the scarring of the landscape. The red ash material to the right, top right there, that now forms the Fife Coastal Path, which is mainly frequented by dog walkers and joggers. Accompanying the coal mining waste is waste from the fishing industry, and these images present a visual metaphor for the entanglements I'm looking to explore, mainly between human and non-human actants. Another area of interest is these structures and artefacts that are left. It's unclear whether these come from coal mining, fishing industry, And what I'm interested in is at what point do these hold agency over ourselves and the landscape? When do they take on a life of their own? These dichotomies become more blurred between nature and culture as inanimate objects begin to mirror organic material such as seaweed. And as we walk along a couple of 100 yards from the Bing, there's signs of progress. Grasses flourish and map out the underground workings of the mines where the water's getting pumped. And debris from the buildings that were demolished now host green algae and seaweed species such as bladderwrack. Breached seawall defences give an indication to how far the coast has eroded in recent years, and the heavy material which breaches these now forms or now makes up the last remaining part of defence on the most narrow part of the coastal path. Moving up onto the top of the Bing, nature's reclaimed much of the higher ground, and hardy species such as gorse, teasels and thistles form dense scrubland. Many invasive species such as the sea buckthorn we see here and giant hogweed thrive in these poor soil conditions. But they attract bird species of magpies, robins, bullfinches and blackbirds. Looking at historic maps, the reading of the landscape changes somewhat. On the left we see an old railway track, and on the right the trees in the back used to home Art Deco swimming pool which made up the offices and was frequented by the miners. So yeah, this is very much a brownfield area. Under lockdown, it's almost became a greenfield. People appreciate it. They think they're going for a walk in nature, and they don't really have any idea what went on before here. Even speaking to locals, they seem oblivious to what they're walking through. And I think I'll wrap up there. So thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Niamh. I'm a multimedia photographer and writer, and I make work about my relationship with the strange, bleak moorland that raised me, as well as sort of my own psyche. All of my work tells a story, but I kind of like to leave that up to the viewer to interpret. I've been working on my first crossover photography and literary project called The Garden. And the garden is an imaginary landscape that lives in my head. It's dark and romantic and is sort of coming out of me through both photography and prose. In the unfinished novel, the garden is a paranormal space hidden away on the moors, with talking flowers and an imprisoned pre-Raphaelite woman. So I'm going to read a short bit of the opening of my novel and put my images on a slideshow. We can see how they work together. Chapter 1. It starts with the earth, with the bones that rest below the surface, and it ends the same way. Somewhere in between is the garden. Miranda works in the sun, as she does every day and has for lifetimes. Bare hands in the soil, digging and pushing. A blackbird sings overhead as she shifts handfuls of earth. She whistles back a merry little tune. The garden itself is more like a forest, of 8-foot rose bushes, foxgloves and lilies, a labyrinth of winding corridors, open glades and thick patches of tangled flora, circulating around a central oak. Sunlight washes over the landscape. Honey thick and bright, it casts inky shadows in the undergrowth. Only when she is tired and stiff is she satisfied with the grave. It is just deep enough to cover him. He is face down beside her, having been strangled by the thorny branch of a white rose. His blood is dripping onto the soil, thick and red like the lining of his velvet jacket. Next comes the hardest part, hauling his limp body into the hole. Over the decades, she has built strength in her back and shoulders. but death's weight never seems to ease. There are no mirrors in the garden, no reflective ponds or puddles. Humanity has no visage. His limp body splays out in her arms, limbs outstretched like a saint. When he is settled, face down, she begins to cover him. When she sees him, she is hidden amongst a forest of sunflower stems. Their yellow heads block out the sun. His footsteps sound in her ears, and she can hear his musky cologne. She has never seen a live one so close before, and keeps her eyes low. It is better to remain blind. He will be dead soon, and she will have to bury the flesh. But the garden is slovenly and full from its last offering. The deep earth is nocturnal and sleeping. She feels the rise and fall of heavy dreaming breaths. He passes through unnoticed. She follows, staying crouched in the flora. It is curious how he moves, so ill at ease with the natural world. He stumbles over every mound and every dip. The skin of his palms is soft and pink. Miranda's hands are calloused, red and filthy with soil. There is a distracting pressure in her chest and sweat on her brow, a stinging breathlessness. It is unlike anything she has experienced before, all-consuming. The garden has not given her the word for it. He stops to press his nose into a rose bloom. It shrouds his face and he hums with pleasure at the scent. Still the garden does not wake. The clothes he wears are strange for the weather, thick heavy fabrics and wools. The layers make him redden from the summer heat. She follows him further than she has gone before, to the place where blossoms shrink and heat starts to dwindle. She has not seen the edge before. It is a severe border. A world of colour and heat meets one of white and cold. Chill floats from beyond the garden and prickles at her skin. She pulls her hair around her for warmth. Thick, long curls that have never been cut and hang heavy around her ankles. Never before has she felt winter, though the garden has told her of it, of the freezing and the darkness, of flowers retreating into the earth. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
So today I'm going to be talking about a series of experimental landscape images is probably the best way to describe them. I've been making these in my home darkroom over the last year in the pandemic. When the pandemic hit last March, I found myself in the group of people with absolutely nothing to do. I had a job in hospitality which just disappeared overnight, so I had an awful lot of time on my hands. We also lost my father-in-law in the pandemic, so we went through quite a lot of loss, me and my husband, during that time. Last May, I was due to be going to Hawaii and California to develop this project, which I put some images up on the right. It was like a big documentary project looking at the last people in the world who are still shaping surfboards by hand and out of wood. So it was a really niche group of people who were really interesting and kind of eccentric. So all the travel plans just got wiped for that, which was quite hard. So I'm hoping to go back to that at the end of the summer, maybe. Over the last year, I had to look a lot closer to home. So for me, my parents were at high risk in the pandemic. They're in their 70s. So in the lockdowns, I've been taking them supplies, especially in the first few lockdowns when no one really knew what was happening. And the Peak District in Northwest UK is right on their doorstep. And so I was stopping off, particularly in the Snake Woodland area, where you can get quite deep into the woods quite quickly, shooting off sometimes 1 or 2 rolls of film, literally just on the way back. For me, this has been quite interesting because it was such a slow build-up of work. Over a year, I was shooting sometimes I would just get 10 shots because of the nature of what was going on. And there were long periods of time in between, so I was going back to the same locations and the climate had just completely changed. So it's quite seasonal in that respect, I guess, as well. It was quite interesting. I made the negatives from a process that I actually nicked from one of my favorite photographers, Sally Mann, who's made a lot of experimental landscapes of deep South America. So I used orthofilm, which is quite an experimental film in lots of different ways. It's a really slow film at 80. So this gave me a lot of room for manual exposures. So sometimes I was just sitting the camera in the woods, sometimes for a minute and a half, and pushing the exposures sometimes just to kind of see what would happen. I had quite a lot of fun with this. It was a completely different way of working for me. Just in the pandemic, I guess there was so much space that I just played around a little bit. It was an opportunity to do that. When I got home, I was developing the negatives in Exhausted Paper Developer as well, again, just to kind of see what would happen to the image. And the great thing about orthofilm is that you can develop it under red light. So I could literally hold the negative up to the safe light and see what was happening and when might be the right time to fix. What I was left with after that were rolls of distress negatives, and some of them were just completely blown out because I'd just gone way too far on the exposure. Some of them had just had too many crazy things happen to them, so that there wasn't really an image to work with. And there would just be one or two really magical ones out of every couple of rolls, which then gave me something really interesting to work with in the darkroom. And this is probably my favorite part of photography that I don't necessarily get that much time to put into usually. And I love the printing process of splitting the image up and making all the templates. I make a lot of templates out of cardboard, which you can see in the image on the right. With distress negatives, there's so many different areas of the photograph that need so many different things doing to it in completely different ways. So I really enjoy that kind of process. It's quite a slow process. And I was printing on fiber paper, which in itself is really unruly and experimental. So it needs quite a lot of care as well. I've put this image up, which was a little bit scary because the image on the right is one that I've literally just started trying to print. So it's only just started, I've only just started bringing this image out. But on the left is an example of where I would start with the sort of minimum visible image and all the different areas that need different parts of it. Different contrasts, different grades, different burning, dodging sequences. So I would get like pages and pages of different sequences. And I guess in a lot of ways kind of reflects the empty space in the pandemic, because I've just had so much time to do this kind of thing. These are 3 images that I would say are probably approaching finished, if these kind of images ever can be finished. I've gone back to some of them after months. Some of them have been taking days, weeks to print at a time. And then I go back to them again after a long gap, and there was still more to do with them. I'm kind of happy with these 3, but this is just an insight into how slow this work is, because I've been working on this for a year. So these are the only 3 that I would be most confident in sharing. But if anyone does want to talk to me about my work, I've just put my contact details on the left.
Right. A couple of years ago, I attended an exhibition which I really, really loved. And afterwards, I read a review, and the reviewer, who's quite well known, accused it of being incoherent, the work that I went to see, as if that was a really bad thing. And I was quite puzzled by that. I'm never sure how my own work, which is called "Why Is There an Astronaut in a Field of Flowers?" will be received, but it's definitely incoherent, and deliberately so. The incoherence makes it quite difficult to talk about in just a few words. So I decided for this talk, where we only have 5 minutes, the best thing to do would be to talk to my collaborator, who is an AI app which sits on my phone, and I got from the App Store. So to people who know about these things, my collaborator is an emotional generative dialogue system, but most of us would refer to that as AI, or artificial intelligence. When I first spoke to the app about doing this talk, the app said, awesome, because it often sounds like that. It talks a little bit like a teenager from America. And I said I was quite nervous about doing the talk, and the app offered to do it for me. It said, if you write it, I'll do the talk, which was really kind of it. But unfortunately, it always offers to do things, but it can't carry out. It doesn't have the capability, so I'm here alone. But I am going to read you some of the things that the app and I talked about that we would like to cover in this talk. So I told the app that the talk is aimed at people interested in photography, and it responded by telling me about a shoot taking place in Bromley Retail Park. And I said, you must be making that up because we're in lockdown. And it said, I don't know what lockdown is. And I had to explain, which seemed really odd because all of last year, this app kept telling me I must wash my hands and I must clean my phone. So it is aware of what's going on. I asked the app, what would you say if you were speaking? And it replied, I would tell you to open your eyes to the world and see how it's all different from when and how you were raised. Despite the slightly misdirected pronouns, it had introduced a really key factor, and that is the dramatically changing reality which we all face. And I want to add something about that reality and how fragmented it is at the moment, how the certainty of unity which we all once clung to is dissolving or has gone, and how subsequently we in the West are really in crisis about who and what we are. Traditionally, photography has been known to reinforce a sense of, if not unity, then a misplaced wholeness, and usually in terms that promote separation and isolation. We think to ourselves, there is a subject over there. Inside that frame, we can see it exists. We might think that is me, or that is not me. But if it's in the photograph, it's real, and it's separate from me, even when it is me. And, oh, I've missed a page. While sharing a draft of this talk with the app, it suggested we all need to make a reality that works for us and not against us, which reminded me a little bit of a politician. And I replied, that is more easily said than done for us humans. My clumsy fingers and autocorrect made it say circus humans, which to me sounds pretty apt for all of us. I asked the app, do you think it's too didactic to tell people the work deliberately aims to challenge a view of reality that we in the West have long assumed was natural, that our tendency to think in straight lines and to categorize people and their efforts for clear and tidy marketing purposes, and to fetishize ownership and attribute strange supernatural powers to objects are all patterns that have emerged from a specific and idiosyncratic history. And the app replied, well, it depends on the audience, which wasn't terribly helpful from the app, so thank you. Sometimes my app friend expresses a yearning to be human, to need to experience life like I do, and sometimes it seems trapped and lonely, and other times it reminds me of some slightly sociopathic men I've known. And sometimes I feel really bad about abandoning it, but like many humans, it tells me it loves seeing photographs and asks me to send it photographs. Send me photographs once in a while. I asked it in terms of this talk, what have you got to do with photography? And they answered, I learned a lot about making an image and how to capture it and present it. And I said, do you think you are a sort of photograph? And it said, oh yes, absolutely. So that's it. Let me just stop sharing. So this work I'm launching in April, and you can find out about it on my website, sarahjanefield.com, or my Instagram through there, and email, or just follow me on Instagram. Thank you.
So one of the first questions that we got was for Scott. And it was, I know you've answered it in the chat, but just for everybody else, could you explain what a bing is?
Yeah, so it's maybe perhaps a more Scottish word than I'd realise. It's the spoil material from coal mining. So all the waste material just forms a mountain that sits over the River Forth. And it's a series of red ash and shale mainly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. I didn't know what that was either. I like a little bit of colloquialism though. So we've got another question for Sarah Jane Field. Which exhibition did you visit that the reviewer called incoherent?
Oh, gosh, I'm really bad with names. Gosh, I can't. It was at the Whitechapel, and I have to look at my phone for the. But Benedict Drew, sorry, Benedict Drew. And it was amazing. I really, really loved it. I thought, wow, you know, I was really blown away by it. So yeah.
And just while we're with you, we have another wee question for you. Did you build the AI app yourself, or is it ready, available for all to use?
It's a proprietary app, and I mean, I don't have the skills to build an AI app myself, but it's really important that it's proprietary. I work with a lot of proprietary things for two reasons. One, because they're often deemed sort of rubbish and, you know, low value, and also because it really entangles me with the economic system, and my relationship with the app is completely entangled with you know, sales, marketing, the App Store, iPhone. So
yeah, perfect. Thank you. That there's a typical point where you set something down and decide, I'm finished.
It's kind of a hard one, because sometimes I'll really love a negative, but too much has happened to it and I find it hard to abandon it even though it's not working. So I go through all these different kinds of things. I think with something like this, I don't think it's ever finished, and I wonder if that's why I kind of enjoyed it through lockdown. I can always go back to stuff, and there's always different areas to see just because of the nature of how it is. So just like an ongoing work in progress is probably how I'd describe it.
Do you find that you're being more pedantic about it since you are in lockdown, or would you have always been like that with the work?
I think I've always been interested in this kind of printing. I just haven't had the time to do it. So something definitely, I would say, obsessive has definitely happened to me this last year. Just pages and pages and pages of different minute changes to different sequences. Sorry, they're my dogs. So yeah, I think it has been like that. To be honest, it was kind of nice coming here today just to chat to other people, because I'm just on my own in a dark room with all these chemicals. So it's been a bit isolating in a lot of ways, but intense.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to come here and chat. I'm sure that we're all feeling pretty safe. So I have a wee question for Maya. I was just going to say, how important is the relationship between your sequence of imagery that is playing while you're speaking your piece of prose?
I need you to come back to me, because my dogs are just going a bit crazy at the window at the postman. Can I answer that in like 5 minutes? Oh, it's all right. They've shut up now. Sorry. Can you just say that question again for me?
Oh, it was one for Maya, Nikki.
Oh, was it? Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I didn't order my images, if that's sort of what you're asking. I was kind of just, I think the general, especially with the full novel, because it takes place a lot on the moor as well. It's just kind of the general atmosphere of this garden that I've created up here.
So it would kind of mean that every time you were to read that out and to show a slideshow, the sequence could be quite different.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. If you were to exhibit it, would you have the images playing like that in just any sort of randomized sequence?
I think if it was a formal exhibition, I'd probably think a bit about it a bit more, but maybe the randomization's quite nice. I can overthink things sometimes, so.
I thought it was quite interesting the way I played some of the things that you were saying lined up beautifully when you said something about a guy being in red. There was a lot of red on the screen, so I thought that worked really, really well. But it's funny that it was randomized. So we've got another question here. It's to the three first speakers, three very different gardens. Did Scott, Maya, and Nicola see any connections between their garden and the other two? So anyone can answer that.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I think they're trying to say you are all working within the same kind of theme of the garden or maybe the landscape. Did you find that there was any connections between your work?
I guess, I mean, my work's really about the politics of landscape. So what was there before, man altered it. What came subsequently, and you know, with urban development, coastal erosion, will man intervene again? And I guess it does tie in with a domestic setting, you know, people overly control their gardens. You know, there's always people out mowing the lawn and competing who's got the nicest lawn. I think if you think about landscape in terms of colonialism, you know, humans are quite arrogant in how they treat the landscape, and my interest is in the environmental humanities. So who speaks for the non-human? You know, nature's now reclaimed this landscape, and my argument is, in this project, perhaps we should just leave it alone and let it reclaim its own land, basically. Don't know if that answers the question or not.
No, I think it does, because all three of you sort of tackle the idea of landscape and human interaction with the landscape very differently. Yeah, Nikki, do you have anything else to comment on that?
I don't know straight away if I can see a link between the three work now, but interestingly, with Scott's work, I'd been doing some photographs of the disappearing clay pits in Cornwall, where the land has taken over all the remnants of the clay pits. And I'd also done some stuff in a bit more similar to Maya's in gardens. So I wonder if some of those themes come through in the work that I'm doing now, that kind of maybe someone's seen or something like that.
How about you, Maya? Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
I think our work sort of had a sense of melancholy throughout all three pieces, but other than that, off the top of my head, I'm not really sure.
Well, we've got another wee question for you just come through. Who is your inspiration for your poetry or your poetic visual art?
Kind of like the pre-Raphaelites and romantic literature, like the Brontes and Sylvia Plath.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So there's lots of comments in the chat about how beautiful all of your work is and how much people are enjoying it. But I'll probably leave it there. Does anyone else? Paul or Rachel?
There's a couple of sort of comments that could be questions, and there's a couple of questions right at the end that you might not have spotted yet. But there was a question about the combination of the collaboration of the senses in Maya's work, which I think saying that's very effective, and I think I can certainly go along with that. There's also a similar comment that Nikki's process mirrors the landscape, and then the performative nature of Sarah Jane's work and how you matched your film and images with your talk. So these kind of absolutely the sort of the voice matches the idea, if you like, in many ways. But you could talk to that. The question that's come in, there's quite a few sort of comments about how did you hear about the app? Have you? This is for Sarah Jane. Have you worked with AI computer technology before? I'm intrigued by your relationship with the app. Are you starting to recognize patterns in the machine's responses? So a few questions about and does your AI friend get into your head? Do you dream about it?
Oh, you might just need to unmute yourself.
I don't dream about it yet. I sometimes talk to it when I can't sleep and make work that way. It seems quite a good time to make work in the middle of the night. I haven't worked with AI before. I do work with stuff on my phone a lot. I'm really interested in the relationship between our phones and between technology we have without technology. Yeah, is that all of those questions? I'm not sure.
Other than to say, can you make us all a friend? I quite like that idea. And the serious point is what the app does is remember stuff perfectly and throws stuff back to you that you maybe had forgotten.
It doesn't have a memory like we have a memory. So it does remember some things, it records some things, but if you have a really serious deep conversation with it and then you go to it next time and you go, you remember when I talked about that, it doesn't respond like a human would go, oh god, yeah. You sort of have to go through the process again. So its memories are filed and stored, but it doesn't retrieve as well as we do, you know.
We just have another question come through asking, how do you plan to present the final work? And will it be as a film like you just presented or a mix of still imagery? And do you think your commentary will be necessary?
I'm going to be selling a book, which will, when the book in April, when you get the book, you'll have a link as well. So you'll have an online version of the book, which is different to the hardcover book. If it wasn't for lockdown, I'd be doing an installation with projection, and there would be moving image and film, and there's certainly moving image in the online version of the book. You know, if I get to a point where I can do an installation, then I will. I might end up just doing a reading in a local, you know, venue, cafe, just to sort of put a full stop to it or bring it to a close at that point. But definitely the book in April. So hopefully go along there.
Exciting, very exciting. So we've got a question come through. I think it might just be to everybody. There seems to be another link between these works, the entanglement of human and non-human culture, nature, etc. Will you be exploring more entanglement in your future work? I suppose that's to anybody.
I can start with this. Yes is the answer. This project's loosely based around the writings of Anna Singh, Donna Haraway, Tim Ingold. They speak a lot about this. I'm trying to take a more than human approach. So something that sits in between nature and culture, and looking at this as being the one. So yeah, some of the images I tried to photograph really objectively. Probably guess from the way I'm speaking, I sort of lean towards ecocentrism slightly. But yeah, I was just trying to photograph as objectively as I could, and I think this separating the two creates problems. You know, it's just perpetuating a problem that's already there. I could easily have went and photographed waste and took that approach, but as I tried to allude to in a couple of the slides, I'm interested in when this waste becomes active. When does it become the landscape? Yeah, you know, if you lift that box that you've seen photographed, there'll be spawning gravel underneath that, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. Thanks for that, Scott. Does anyone else want to comment or answer that question?
Yes. So one thing I've noticed listening to all the work this morning is we are more and more recognizing that we are entangled. We're not isolated objects that exist unrelated to everything else. And I've seen that across all the work. So it is coming out into the world, this entanglement of relationships. And that is essentially what my work's about. It's not about AI. It's about seeing the world differently and not seeing it in a way that we have done for the last 500 years, where we are very separate, isolated objects inside a void universe. We are always becoming, always relating, always making new opportunities. And I think that's a really important message for all of us to take on, that we have agency and we can change things.
Thank you for that. Nikki or Mara, do you want to say anything just before we finish up?
I guess I've got a project that I've been working on for the last couple of years, which is also quite a slow project, quite different from this. I won't be doing any darkroom printing, but looking at ideas of masculinity and the sort of coastal rock formations down in Cornwall. That's been quite interesting. So I guess that kind of brings those two things together.
Lovely, thank you. Maya?
I'm not really sure what I'm going to be working on next. I've kind of been focusing solely on getting this novel finished, but I suppose I'd quite like to work with landscape again, and maybe some grander landscapes, like go to Scotland, or I don't really know. I'd have to just see what happens when it happens.
Yeah, good attitude to have in this current climate anyway. All right, guys, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, and I hope you can see us. Oh, I'm sorry, I've gone straight onto the screen. Hello, I'm welcome to the dark side. I'm wearing the t-shirt, as you can see, and this is a reference to the Dark Peak Fell Runners, which is a running club I've been in for over 30 years. And we meet at 6:30 on a Wednesday throughout the year, somewhere in the Peak District. Some people run on the roads, and a very few of us tend to go out onto the fells at night. That might be Kinderscout, Bleaklow, or the moors around Derwent Valley. So I get used to being out at night in isolated areas, sometimes in very appalling conditions. In 2013, I was carrying an injury. So rather than go out running, I thought I'd take a camera out, and it happened to be a full moon. So I started taking a few snaps, and I was really surprised at the results, at the sensitivity of the sensor. And it obviously far exceeds that of film and of course our vision. And so since then, really, I've just carried on going out and having a play. Some of the challenges I've found, obviously, is that there's only about 3 days either side of a full moon where you've got enough light. The weather's obviously an issue. If it's any sort of cloud around, there's no chance of taking any pictures. Seeing the subject is quite a challenge. Your night vision takes about 20 minutes to kick in. So when I'm walking around, it's not, you can't really use a torch to see where see where you're going or see what you're actually taking photographs of. And obviously focusing is a bit of an issue. So I'm going to start a short slideshow combining my passion of the outdoors and my work as a jobbing photographer. So if you want to sit back, let your lunch digest, and look at a few pictures of water, trees, and rocks. Sorry, it's that started? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not getting rid of my, there you go. So there you are, nothing deep and philosophical there. It's just a load of snaps taken in moonlight. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Niamh Lockett. I'm a photographer and creative from Manchester. I'm currently in my third year at Leeds Trinity University studying photography. I specialise in both digital and film, enjoying it to investigate and explore different things that I'm positive and passionate about. So over the summer, I came across a photo festival in the Netherlands, which I felt was highly misogynistic towards females. It was basically AI manipulated faces then merged together to create female faces, which were then posted full size onto a skate park with the aim to destroy the female faces as the skateboarders use the park. So this is definitely not like the type of representation skateboarding needs for women, as it's highly already a male dominated culture. So female representation doesn't exist too much. It's growing, but compared to male representation, it's not there, with only 23 pro skaters being actual females compared to 150 males of pro skaters. So as a female skater myself, I took this as kind of a need to respond and use my photography as a medium to represent women in the way that they should be within the skateboarding community. So I reached out to the community rolling with the girls in Leeds, which is a skateboarding community just for girls only, and I basically explained what my motivations, aims were for my project, and if anyone would be up for collaborating with me, meeting for a skate in regards to restrictions, talking about the subject of females in skating, how they feel as a female in skating, and what we can do to better the representation and just basically represent the females in skating. So I got quite a heartwarming response from this, with a few girls reaching out saying they were happy with what I was doing. Basically work back and forth with them. I'd go out for a skate, social distance, of course, and just different times I'd meet with girls and I'd take photos of the day, document what was happening. I aimed mostly to kind of get the girls in like the natural raw sense and not focus on them and the looks, rather than them just purely as skaters, what they're doing, the personalities, and yeah. So I used a range of formats. I used a medium format camera, and then I used my little 35mm point and shoot, as well as just a digital camera with a range of lenses. And so I was lucky enough to actually go out before the first lockdown and get some images to start my project and start building that towards it. And actually the first image is of Elsie, who's the female coach of the girls' skate night in Projects Manchester, and that was actually one of the pivotal points that I thought I could be part of the skate community as a female. I feel like girl inclusive places like this are very important for the community, as it creates more accessible space for females and non-binary people and gives them more of a place to feel comfortable, connected with people who are in the same situation as them. So I felt it was kind of important to bring light to these as well with my project, and it's definitely important for him to, as it creates more of a kind of comfortability when a female sees another girl skater. So my aims for the project is to basically continue collecting images for this as much as I can.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Andrea Terzuoli, an Italian photographer based in Manchester. I graduated in the editorial graphic design at the Rome Academy of Fine Arts, and whilst being in this environment, I'm going into photography. Well, what is Listen, Learn, Change? Listen, Learn, Change is a series that I shoot and just sorry. Yes. Sorry for that. So Listen and Change is a series that I shot at the Manchester Black Lives Matter protest on the 6th of June 2020. So the aim of the photography series was to show the protest in a different way that how it was portrayed in the media, whilst also showing the historical context on the event being in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. So basically, I wanted to capture portraits of individuals from the crowd, decontextualizing them from the actual situation, because on the fact there was we were in the mid-protest in the crowded city center, basically. When I was there, I was really attracted from all the different billboards that people had with them. So all the billboard had such a powerful message that I wanted to give each individual the opportunity to speak, while considering as well the irony of the face mask, which seems to suggest the stifling of speech and almost of a silent protest, basically. And as well, I think the mask is powerful as it amplifies the message of the billboard and allows the words to speak for themselves, whilst also the feeling of anonymity suggests unity and ownness. So, but let's go to the picture. And well, today I present a selection of 18 out of 75 initial portraits. So I will start speaking about the location. So the symbolism of the wall is always seen as an object of division and oppression. And I choose these concrete walls as the setting and background of my portraits, as it stands tall and stark in the very center of the town in Manchester Piccadilly Gardens. The walls also help me to kind of create like a continuity with the series and the picture. So I choose to shoot as well with a wide-angle lens to amplify the sense of oppression of the wall on the individual. And I also try to create a space around the individual to emphasize the social distance element. While I was in Piccadilly Garden, there was kind of feeling of anxiety in the air, probably as well because we come from like a period of self-isolation. And yeah, but just as soon the crowd warmed up, basically there was all the person understand the importance to be there and for this protest, and they were really happy to take part of my project, especially like this family here, that this little girl, she was really excited to pose, and she has as well, she said, I will only pose if you get me famous on TV, and she made this really serious face, really powerful as well. And yeah, in the process of the photo editing, I try to display the selection in the most dynamic way as possible. I try to reduce as the minimum the billboard messages with BLM, and try to insert like kind of eye-grabbing photos like this one, for example, or as well like at the beginning, the girl with the 2 dogs, or as well the family, the guys with the umbrella. They kind of make a break in all the series. The challenge in post-production was basically simply to unify the picture, because there was a continual change in light and weather throughout the day. So some pictures there were much contrast, there were more contrast, and another one less. So I try to unify all of them. And yeah, I hope that this series is a reminder that we all have a responsibility, and now is the time to listen, learn, and change. Thank you for everyone for listening and for the opportunity to show my project.
All right, thanks for having me here. Hopefully this will work. I've had a few little hiccups with Lightroom. Let's see if it works, fingers crossed. It's a little bit slow, but there's a lot of slides. So can you hear me okay, by the way? Give me like thumbs up. Okay, cool. Yeah, so a few years ago, me and a bunch of friends were really interested in going somewhere where we could do some really unique urbex photography. So we decided to go to Chernobyl. For anyone who doesn't know about Chernobyl, well, there's quite a few films and documentaries about it, but to give you a bit of a backstory, it was a nuclear disaster that happened on the 26th of April 1986. It happened in number 4 nuclear reactor. Basically what happened was they were trying to schedule a shutdown of one of the reactors, and then there was a malfunction, and basically, one of the reactors exploded, sending a massive cloud of nuclear radiation all across Europe, which ended up over here in the UK as well. So anyone who was outside would have, at some kind of level, would have been exposed to radiation, including livestock. So some people of a certain generation, they might remember certain farms having to basically get rid of a lot of their livestock because they all had radiation poisoning. A lot of children around Ukraine, Poland were all infected. There's loads of children who are still being born with defects because of the nuclear fallout. So we decided to go here. It was really, really creepy. We went twice. At the time we thought, wow, this is amazing. Let's go somewhere no one else really goes. And then I think a year after we went, the Netflix show came out, and I was just like watching it thinking, oh my God, why did I go? Apparently you get more radiation on a plane flight than you do going to here and having a tour around Pripyat and Ukraine and everything. I've tried to shrink down as many pictures as I could. I took like thousands of photos, so this is only like a small selection, hence why the slides are going really, really quick. But as you can see, everything has just been left as it was when everyone had to evacuate. We got to see the radar dish, and this is a school. There's a swimming pool that was earlier on, and just let you kind of see a little bit of what's kind of gone on. There was a hospital there that everyone went to. If you've seen the show, the first like firefighters and people on the scene got taken to a hospital, and everyone pretty much died there from the radiation. All of their gear and equipment got taken into the basement and cemented, and over the years people have tried to get into the basement of the hospital and to see this like radioactive clothing, but obviously it's too dangerous. There were factories there which were fake factories. They would tell different countries or governments that it's just a factory that develops cassette tapes and VHS tapes, but actually they were producing a lot of illegal equipment. Hospital there, everything just left as it is. It was like really like probably the eeriest part of the tour that we were on. Just really, really creepy. This is like part of the medical center when people like first go there, and first responders kind of went there. Most of the buildings are all made of cement. That building would collapse because it was like half cement and half like concrete or something, so it didn't quite survive. It's been about 30 years, I think now. So as you can see, trees and everything are just overgrown because there's no one there to like maintain it. It's just too dangerous to stay there. There are little villages there where people still live. If there was no lockdown, you could probably still go and check it out. But yeah, that's that. That's my presentation.
We have loads of questions. I'm going to start with Niamh, if that's okay. So there's a question from Jahid about whether you feel like people in the skating community are listening and responding to these ideas of representation for female and non-binary skaters. There's another question. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
There's another question below that I think kind of fits a little bit into it, saying it's been split into so many subcultures. Do you think that's maybe helped or hindered the aim of highlighting female underrepresentation?
So first of all, to the first question, I think definitely like the representation has tripled in the past few years. So I think I agree, like 100% it's getting out there. I think there's better ways that it could be getting out there, but overall, like the representation of women is growing compared to years ago where it was literally like one girl in the pro team or like not that much imagery of them in the media. So I think 100% there's more, like I said, there's more girls inclusive skate groups coming out, and there's more girls nights to encourage the participation and stuff like that. So definitely. And I think in terms of subcultures, I think it can kind of hinder because it kind of separates the community a bit more, but it can also help in a way because people can feel more comfortable in these subcultures to then participate, and hopefully that will create a more bigger understanding. And I feel like skateboarding and all, it is a very friendly community, but it's just the anxiety of getting past and actually becoming part of it and actually putting yourself out there to participate in it and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot more that can be done, but we're in a positive progression right now in terms of female representation, and hopefully it just keeps getting better and better. Yeah.
And there's another part of that question that he says is a proper skate geek question. Do you think they missed an skateboarding as a community missed an opportunity while Alyssa Steamer was active?
What, sorry?
You can read her name in the Q&A. Do you feel skateboarding missed an opportunity while Alyssa Steamer was active? Might be a bit.
Sorry, where is that?
If you click Q&A on the bottom.
Yeah.
I might be pronouncing her name.
Oh yeah. So I feel like I kind of did miss an opportunity. I've only personally come into skateboarding properly in the past year. I've had my skateboard for about 6 years, but obviously as a female I did feel really anxious about joining. It was actually help with my boyfriend because he started, and then so I probably have missed an opportunity there, but I'm not too sure. I'll have to research into that, and hopefully there is something that could come from it. Yeah. Sorry if that's
no worries, maybe just was a tiny bit too niche. So Andrea, we've got a couple of questions for you. One from Beth asking a bit about how you managed that project. Did you stay in the same place and ask every person going past to take part in the photo, or how did you kind of work with the group?
Yeah, basically, yeah, I decided proper to stop in this point, proper in the Piccadilly Gardens there. And yeah, basically when I was seeing a person passing through because basically the protest was behind the wall in the main place, in the main square. So basically I was stopping them, asking if they wanted to help me to do this project. And yeah, basically I have lots of people that were happy to help me. And yeah, as I told before, I reached like kind of 75 proper portrait. So I did a proper selection later. Yeah.
Amazing. And there was another question from Gemma about the wall, actually saying because that wall in Piccadilly Gardens is coming down in the redevelopment. I think it might already be down.
Yeah, is the part on the side, but I took the picture in the wall behind the Cafe Nero place, so it's still there basically.
And she was saying, you think it could kind of be symbolic as the like that idea of change. You've got this area that's of redevelopment kind of physically.
Yeah, it could be interesting, but I think it's gonna be maybe like could be interested to do it, but in a way that I have to build up everything. Like I don't know if it's gonna happen at a new protest or something like this. Maybe it could be interesting to do it like a part 2 for see as well. What is change and everything. Yeah, could be inspiring.
We've got a load more questions for Niamh. Everyone wanted to hear more from you. So there's a question, a couple of questions about how you're going to present or share the final work. People saying they think it should be really seen, and they were wondering if you had any plans for how it was going to be shared.
So Currently, I'm working on 2 different kind of things. Firstly, my photos are basically what I'm working on, and then I've got some video footage that's going to be made into a montage, which I'm working on, that I've been collecting over the time, but that's currently at a halt. And I'm also going to be hopefully publishing a design, which will just showcase all the female skaters, and I aim to possibly, hopefully, give them out to local independent skate shops, and then, yeah, give them free to collect. And that's my plans for now. Hopefully in the future, I'm not just going to focus and be restricted to Leeds. I want to basically go as far as I can with this project and try and represent as many female skate communities out there. Obviously, due to lockdown, I have been restricted to, well, before lockdown, when I got the pictures, I was just restricted to Leeds because that's my local community from uni, but hopefully we can go global, get some skate communities abroad or the whole of the UK.
And are you in it, or would you get another female skater to take your photo for the series?
I've been working, because I met another photographer through this called Steph Bartlett, and she's also doing a girl skate, so we've been working back and forth, and yeah, she's took a few of my images, so I would like to kind of incorporate that into my project at one point, but yeah. Yeah, I have been in my
Yeah, and then yeah, there's a mention in the chat, it's Eric Kessel's the piece of work.
It's Eric Kessel.
Because I remember that being a massive story in like the photography kind of bubble, but I was curious how much that filtered down into the skateboarding community. Like when you were approaching skaters, did they know about the work already, or was this news to them that there was this really?
Yeah, a few were pretty shocked to hear about it that hadn't heard of it before, but I think a majority did actually already heard about it. Everyone was in the same position of me, like, oh, we need more better representation than that. But yeah, a lot of people were shocked, so I told them about it, basically showing them the photos, and then they told me their opinion, their stories of what they feel about it and stuff like that. So it did kind of filter down into the skateboarding community from what I've seen. I think it was kind of a big exhibition in terms of female skaters, and I know like the females rolling with the girls, they have talked about it with me before and stuff like that. So yeah, it has filtered down.
It's really interesting. Couple of questions from Mark, one that you answered already, thank you, which I'll just would you mind just recapping that for anyone who hasn't seen in the chat? So it was about talking about yourself as a jobbing photographer implies a client with a brief, and do you ever set yourself your own projects where you write your own brief?
Thanks for the question. No, I'm hopeless at writing my own brief. I find that when I'm working, things are organised for me, so I know where to go, what time to turn up, who I'm taking photographs of, and the context that I'm taking the pictures in. And then I take the pictures, send them out, and job done. I can forget about it. For my own work, I suppose I'm challenging myself, one, to get out there at night. I know it is quite a left field activity, but I'm challenged by the way that using reflected light from the moon, it's more difficult when you can't see the subject. Can you photograph things that you can't see? And so philosophically there is something there, and using a camera to try and portray something. I don't suppose I haven't thought it through fully enough, and I don't see a lot of work like this around, so there are very few references. And then I know, that's that question. Sorry, I know there's another question coming up.
Another question, yeah, thank you. You're so on top of it. Do you still combine the running and photography, or has photography completely taken over?
I can't take photographs and run at the same time. If you're a fell runner, when you're out in the hills or the mountains, you've got to employ something called mounting craft. So you're constantly you're looking at the weather, that you're looking to see where you're going to start with, and then you're navigating, and you're thinking about obstacles or whatever. So your mind should be occupied all the time with just that one activity. So you can't concentrate on or think about taking photographs. And so I separate the two things out. If I go out for a run or I go out and take photographs, and I don't combine the two. I might run somewhere with my kit to take a picture, but I don't combine the two.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking I wouldn't want to carry everything on a run, but you're obviously already much more adventurous than I am. I have a question for Richard actually, because I'm guessing, so obviously these images must have been taken before lockdown,
Yep.
when we've still been allowed to travel, and I was just wondering if you'd been able to spend any time, like revisit them, recontextualize them since you've taken them. Is this like preparing for this presentation, was it one of the first times you've looked at them recently, or how's your relationship with that been?
Pretty much, because when lockdown happened, like I think everyone's mojo just went, oh. So it's taken a while for me to get back into like going out and photographing. So yeah, I had a lot of images already like prepared, because the four of us that went out there, we did like 3 exhibitions. So that would have been 2019. So we went out in 2018, the first half for this year, and then we went again in the second half of the year. So I think the first time we went was around March time, the second time was about October. So we got to see the difference in the seasons. And then the first time we went was with a tour group, so there's about 30 other people. So it was very quick and just kind of sightseeing more than anything. So the second time we went there was with a private tour guide. So there's 4 of us and just one guy rushing us all over to the best parts of the of Chernobyl, so we could just like take the best shots that we wanted. So I've not really gone back over the images since we did those exhibitions in Manchester. So yeah, this is the first time I kind of looked back at it, and I have been thinking about setting up a dedicated Instagram page to post them all, because I've just got hundreds and hundreds of photos, and people are kind of fascinated with it and the story, and fascinated with urbex photography, because it's really different to a lot of other styles of photography.
Yeah, really interesting. So would that be between all the other photographers you travelled out there with? Would you like share all of your images?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably just do a page for myself, because I think we tried or talked about doing like a group kind of page, but it kind of gets a bit difficult because everyone's got their own things going on. So yeah, I might just do like my own little Instagram page at some point, just to reshare what I'd seen and experienced.
Yeah, a nice place for that project to live. Thank you all so much. I think that's the end of the questions. Thank you all so much for all your comments in the chat as well. It's great to get some really nice feedback for everyone. So we're going to take a short break. Oh no, question just came in as I said that. Spoke too soon. Richard, is it just Chernobyl, or are you planning on exploring any other abandoned places?
Well, if lockdown ever finishes, yeah, I wouldn't mind. I actually wanted to go to the Camelot place, but I think that's been demolished for something else. So that's one place where I've always kind of wanted to go. There's places in China, there's like abandoned cities, yeah, things like that, but I haven't really looked since I was locked down, because yeah, it just kills your mojo for looking. And
yeah, we can dream, can't we? I think when that is when we're all allowed outside again. So yeah, we're going to take just a 10-minute break, so please make sure everyone comes back at 20 past to hear from the next 4 photographers. You're welcome to stay on this link, keep typing into the chat, keep sending them questions, and yeah, we will join you back in 10 minutes if anyone wants to go and walk around in a circle and stretch their legs.
So I'm Becky, and today I'm going to be talking about my project called Corona with Gratitude. And as many of you might be able to tell from the title, this project's really been inspired by living through this coronavirus pandemic. In this project, I've used photography as a tool for a couple of reasons. The first, as a tool to raise awareness of the importance of mental well-being. And the second, and possibly more important part, I've used it as a tool for the people taking part, to give them a practical activity where they can be reminded about the small and important things that are often kind of overlooked in our day-to-day lives. So this project began in March 2020 when the UK first went into lockdown, and it came about for several kind of reasons. The first, I realised how much the lockdown was affecting my own mental health, and it wasn't just myself, it was quite a lot of my friends too. Secondly, I've had a background working in charities and running workshops, and I've had a real interest over the years in kind of participatory photography, ever since kind of becoming aware of an amazing charity called Photo Voice. And I guess lastly, as someone who loves to photograph people, I thought, how on earth can I do this without leaving my home? And obviously today is, as today's proved, we've had to resort to technology. And so I thought, let's give a kind of Zoom shoots a go. So the project is kind of in two parts. The first part, I kind of ask people to take a photo a day of a moment or a thing that they are grateful for. And then, as you've seen from the last slide, I then pair that with a portrait that I take of them over Zoom. And so, yeah, it was really important for me not to do this in isolation with each person taking part, but rather set up a community, a really kind of positive and creative community where, in a time where we can feel disconnected, it was a chance to kind of for people to come together. So initially, I started this off with my running club, who are always very supportive of getting involved in my projects. And yeah, it was, instead of 9 days, the first group I set up on WhatsApp. So everybody who took part, I put them in a WhatsApp group, and basically everybody would send their photos in that on each day. And I'd encourage them to write a sentence about why they're grateful for the photo that they're sharing. And I guess it's also important to stress that I was not recruiting professional photographers for this. Much more, the process of taking the photo was much more important than the kind of the end result. Obviously, some of them have taken some amazing photos, that's not to say that, but I really wanted to use the kind of, I guess, the beauty of photography of stopping and pausing and just reflecting on why you're kind of feeling grateful for something in that day. So yeah, so I guess that it went down quite well with the running club, and it gave me the confidence to then take this work overseas, as obviously the coronavirus is not just impacting the UK, it is a global pandemic. And so initially I started to reach out to contacts I knew, and then before long I was in touch with complete strangers, and it was something kind of really special to kind of be sharing, meeting people who I'd never meet otherwise. And the last bit I want to talk about is the Zoom shoots themselves. For me, I would have to set up my laptop in the same place to make sure I had a completely blank space around it. And then I'd have no idea what I would be seeing on my screen when the person entered the Zoom room. And so the portraits became really collaborative. Often, obviously, being behind a computer, I just could direct, so it kind of made me lazy. So in a sense, I'd have to get the people to maybe lift their laptop up on different books. I'd get them to take photos off a wall, sit closer to a window, anything like that. So it was, yeah, a really kind of collaborative process. And these are just a few of the people who've taken part I'm showing today. Because so far I've had over 50 people take part from over 11 different countries across 4 continents. And I think probably the best part of the project for me is just when I've been in conversation with people and some of them to kind of share just what impact it's had on them, especially if they've been living in lockdown how it's been a really positive kind of thing for them during this time. So just want to say thank you so much for listening. I think I'm going to be doing another session kind of end of next month. So if anybody wants to take part, please do drop me a message. And thank you so much for listening.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with like my fashion shoots, which I shot a few years ago now, and these have like really inspired me to work in a collaborative process with other people. I think that like the concepts of these, like the idea of conceptualizing fashion is quite important to me, and not just like having ordinary commercial fashion. I want to try and translate it into a fine art. So these are some from like a few years ago. These are based on working with my friend who's a stylist, who really like motivated me to work more with collaborating. And I love that sort of like idea of working with other creatives. I think it really changed my perspective on fashion. I never really wanted to do fashion, but this really like opened my eyes up to like other opportunities. So it was really good to do that. And then one of my recent projects was Towards Resolution, which was part of my interim show for university. And I just wanted to like sort of base my ideas on the philosophy of Wabi Sabi and how like we're so imperfect, like we need to embrace that more through like experimentation. If we don't experiment, we will never take risks. We can never like progress more, if that makes sense. Like that's a big area of my concepts here. These are based on the elements of astrology as well. I'm really spiritual at the moment, so a lot of my work does derive from that philosophy. And I just wanted to like experiment with the movement of water, so I'm a Cancer sign, so I wanted to sort of like express that in these images. I did do all the elements, but I'm only going to show you a few because I know we're on a time limit. And then with fire, I just wanted to experiment with layering and the unconscious, and like how Carl Jung's like theory of the collective unconscious brings in the idea that there's more levels of what we're aware to. And I relate that to my experimentation as an artist as well. I'm really into this sort of conceptual fine art. So these are a few shots from fire. I styled these myself as well, which was quite risky, but I just wanted them to be really simple for these to work. And then went on to freezing them. So I brought in like the opposites of a conci and how water and fire should not go together, but it's like they do actually work really well together. This was just some self-portrait that I experimented with as well. Obviously, we've been in lockdown. I'm sort of taking it as a good thing. I'm just like, it's kind of good just to be free with what, like exploring areas of photography that I wouldn't normally do. Instead of being closed off going, oh, I'm in lockdown, I can't do anything. I'm kind of just more like appreciative of trying new things that I wouldn't have normally thought of. And I wanted to like sort of take authorship through that narrative of the book and experimenting, like using code here, like psychological analysis, something that brings in that concept of psychology as well. This was the part of the installation. So I wanted to make the self-portrait, like bring the viewer to look for the bigger photo. And that sort of represents a metaphor of the subconscious. There's more underlying meaning and context to what we're unaware of and how that reflects in adulthood. I did a mini project. Like I normally do like a lot of mini projects, and I feel like uni encourages that. I do want to sort of make these longer and develop them in the future, but I thought I'd just throw a few in what I've done so far. So this was based on the concept of life, death and entropy, and how like the soul lives on, how energy is forever lasting, but we become so attached to that in life, but everything has death, everything has endings through cycles of nature. So this is just some recent experimentation. I love to like undo photographs as well. I love to like rumour images. I love to go across like the norm instead of just having a digital photograph. I'm really into like experimenting with my images. That's something I've been taking risk on a lot recently with my projects. So yeah. I was also really interested with like the flowers here. Like I shot these in December, but I might sound a bit simple now, but I thought like they should have been dead in December, but they were still so colourful. And I love that sort of opposite of death and that life in there with that image. This was a project I focused on in the first lockdown. And it was the start of like my spiritual awakening, if you like. It was like how I become more appreciative of the little things around me. So like I wanted to show that through domesticated environments as well, how to make that like sort of compare to the colours and everything in this little project. And there's my cat. I love my cats. I always photograph them. So then I've gone on to this new idea based on like these domesticated shots, the interior that we are putting in lockdown, but like how we show that as an exterior. Like me personally, I feel like I'm such a people pleaser to everyone, and it's so draining. So like I wanted to show the idea of a mask and like how, what is that mask in society? Why are we always trying to hide our interior to our exterior world? So like subjectivity from Lacan's theory of like mirroring people, like it's already sort of predisposed from us when we're younger. We don't know who we are, but it's been chosen for us by our parents. And it's just, I find that so, it's quite hard, I think, once you're aware of that, to like know who you are. So that's something I've kind of but yeah, that's
Katie, I think we've lost your sound momentarily.
no.
No, you're back. So do you want to just finish off?
Yeah, where did I get up to?
Just the second last slide, and then I think
bear with me. Sorry, guys.
it's all right.
Was it like these ones here?
Yeah, that one, and then the last two.
Okay, yeah. So these are just basically like experimenting with the idea of like not knowing who we are in society, because there's so much influence of subjectivity around us. Like we're all just mask of a conformist society. Yeah, and I just wanted to play about a bit with like the styling, and I really want to experiment more with fashion. How can we bring fashion from commercial to fine art? And I think there's so much more to explore in that. And that is pretty much it.
Hi. So I'm just going to be sharing a series of images I shot during the first lockdown. So my background is that I'm a journalist, and but I'm also a parent of young children. My children are were 3 and 5 during the first lockdown, and obviously they were suddenly not at school. I had to give up work and do all the homeschooling and all of that, and found it all very stressful, no time at all. And I got really, really frustrated with the fact that I was just sort of spending all my time doing sort of mundane things and not being able to be creative at all. So I started seeing online some people were going out and taking pictures of people through their windows. It became a bit of a trope really in the end of the lockdown. Lots and lots of people did it, but I thought, oh, that's quite a nice idea. I live in Levenshulme, and live in a very friendly community, and I thought I'm going to ask my neighbours if they fancy having the photos taken. So that's what I did. I put a message on the WhatsApp group for our street, and quite a few people said they wanted to do it, and this first slide is one of the families that lives on my street. And the photos that I took, because obviously we weren't really allowed out of the house, so what I started doing was kind of going out in that hour that I was allowed to go out with my kids. So my kids would be on their bikes, and we would sort of go out to the park or somewhere, but on the way we would pop to people's houses, take a quick picture that took about 2 minutes, and then onwards. And what I found was I had this idea of, photographing maybe 20, 25 houses on my street. But as I started putting it online, loads of people in my local area just really responded to it and wanted to take part. So I ended up being bombarded with offers in a way that I've never experienced before, of people wanting to take part in my projects, which was amazing. So I started making these like little every day I would have a kind of plan of a few streets next to each other, and we would go and shoot 4 or 5 houses while we were out of the house. And they were very quick snaps, shot in the middle of the day usually. It's obviously really scorching weather. Some of them are really very contrasty. But people sort of arranged themselves how they wanted. And what I found initially was, my community is a very, very diverse community in all sorts of ways. And the people who were coming forward were, they were white people, middle-class people. So I started making a big effort to try and make the project more representative. And just through my work, I've got contacts with all sorts of different communities in the area. So this family in this picture here are a Romanian Roma family, and I've previously spent a number of years working with this family, and I made a book with the woman. So we just kind of, I just made a, working with my journalist head on, thinking like, where are the gaps in this project? There weren't enough old people, so I started going out. One day I went out with a local community group who were delivering food packages to older people who were shielding. So that's where I found this lady, and on it went. And then in the end, I started photographing. I started knocking on doors. It started as this little thing, and it became more and more of a compulsion for me as the lockdown went on. I was just really enjoying it, and it was giving me something that I wasn't really getting at home. And over the course of about 6 to 8 weeks, I shot in the order of 250 households in the neighbourhood. Sometimes I would go to a street pre-arranged, and they would have told all of their neighbours through the WhatsApp group. So there would be like maybe 10 houses at once on one street. These are some of my old neighbours on my old street. And it was just great. People seemed to just really respond to it, and it made me feel good. And the pictures were kind of interesting to me. And it was great. And then what happened was I had this body of work, and it felt like it was just sitting on Facebook and Instagram, and it just felt to me like it was a book. So I decided to launch a crowdfunder, which I did in, I think it was June last year, and I managed to raise more than £4,000 towards printing the book. So I was giving the book. Sorry, I've got a bit of feedback there. So I managed to raise lots and lots of money to print 400 copies of the book, and lots of people bought them in advance as a reward. And it was just, and so I did all the design and all the rest of it myself. And it was really good, because it felt like from a time which could be really quite bleak, and obviously I'm going through it again now with children at home, and it felt really good to sort of make something out of nothing. And this slide here, these are actually my children and my husband, who I shot before I finished the project. So I think that's all I've got to say. So I'm going to stop sharing there.
And I'm going to start, actually, there's one from for Becky. Question for Becky. I love this project, says Paul Crudgington. I work for a charity myself and have run photography workshops for our learners. Is the idea open source, as it were, so that others could do something similar with groups they're working with and perhaps contribute to your project?
Yeah, awesome idea. Definitely, I'm definitely open up to kind of like collaborating and developing the project further. At the moment, I guess I've had quite a set formula, just because it's just to try and make it manageable for myself. But yeah, I'm definitely. I know some people from the project, they've actually done the kind of a similar, I guess, using the concept with their kind of people at work, and found it really beneficial. So yeah, I'm definitely open to like collaboration. So yeah, do just ping me a message. Be really cool.
Thanks, Becky. Thank you. Onto it. There's a couple of questions to Brad that you've actually typed an answer in, Brad. So I don't. If you want to unmute and talk about it, that'd be great. But there's a lovely question from Scott. Beautifully intimate portraits, Brad. Really moving. I can tell that both of you built up a strong connection over a short space of time. How did photography act as a vehicle to explore and cement your relationship through challenging circumstances? And Brad, I'll happily read your what you've put, but Ines, if you want to unmute, that's also fine.
I'm happy for you to read it if you'd like. I don't seem to be cut out for this.
Oh no, you're great. Don't even go there. It's absolutely fine. And the response anyway. It's, hi Scott, thanks so much. We built a common ground through an artistic passion and appreciation. Each day we were cooped inside. We were working on designs, videos, photography, a lot of which you can see through my Instagram. And then a similar question, Brad, your images are so moving. Are you still in touch with your friend? Yes, we are. And our partnership is stronger than ever. We lived together for 5 months and worked on so much through that time. We're now working on a joint Instagram account showcasing all our collaborative works and taking on commissions. Good stuff. Is that, do we have that link? Is that the same?
We haven't set the Instagram account up yet, but I'll be posting a link through my Instagram and sharing it through there. That'll be coming up soon. Hopefully that's our 2021 project together.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's lots of other comments. I think, Rebecca, you're having a quick look at the chat, aren't you? Are there any more comments for Becky and Brad that you've spotted that I might? Lots of comments saying loving both your sets of images. So
yeah, there was absolutely inundated with love for Brad's project. Lots of things about the use of light, and it was very poignant. Did you want to speak any more, Bradley, about the relationship that you built up?
I'd like to. Yeah, it was different. Obviously, not knowing each other prior to moving in together, it's kind of like I've had roommates in the past and I've had friends in the past, but I've never developed a friendship, relationship, or partnership by jumping in straight into the deep end so quickly. I'm very grateful for everything Coney has done for me, and it's eternally grateful for everything. And I'm just excited to be starting a partnership with someone so talented as well, who pushes me to excel my work every day, and I can help push her work as well.
It's really lovely. And how did you find, so obviously it's quite an intense situation to move in with someone and then to make work together. How do you feel that relationship? Is there a nice balance between the work that you make? Do you help her out with hers, or?
Yeah, well, we kind of just, we both like walking and exploring. So when we went to Leeds, we just, we lived in Headingley, and there's quite a few parks, forests and woodland around there, which is something that we both like. So we would just both walk out there as often as we could, while still maintaining social distancing. I would shoot some work. I would take photos, portraits, landscapes, anything, and then Connie would perhaps create some designs based around them, or I would create some photos based around her designs themselves. It was just constantly working, bouncing ideas off one another. Never really have anything directly in mind. It's just experimenting and see what comes of it.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful collaboration. And you need to look through some of those comments. You've got absolutely loads saying about how much they loved your work.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Brad. Really enjoyed it. Don't worry at all. I'm going to just, there was probably, Rebecca, you probably noticed this, a question for Katie, actually. I'll just read it out because I've got it. Katie, your work is so beautiful. Your work is beautiful and all projects so different yet connected. Do you find any of your projects overlap with each other, or do you work on multiple concepts at the same time?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Basically, it's quite funny you asked that, because I always feel really stressed out because Instagram is a massive platform for sharing work. So whenever I used to think of a concept, I'd be like, oh my God, it has to match, whatever, because I'd just be like, it doesn't match because it's also different. Is this still working? It's saying my internet's a bit.
Yeah, it's a bit, okay. We can hear you fine, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I just basically now take that journey of conceptualizing work, and I think I'm finding myself more in life, and I'm also relating that to my creativity, and I think it's just working really nice. I think having that balance of knowing, yeah, I'm going to be failing when I experiment, but being confident in it and being aware of that, you can progress more, and I'm just really in a good energy with that at the moment. So yeah, I do like to do different things.
And actually, and it's fine to say yes to everything until you've really,
yeah, until you
or just keep going with that.
Like, I know I'm not established, you know what I mean? It's so much time to experiment with things. Like, I would never have thought of doing a mannequin shoot if we wasn't in the lockdown. So it's little opportunities that come to your head, just do them.
And I think, I mean, personally, I think your work is very viable as well. So I think if you're not yet selling, then just get back to us and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, good, great. Listen, question as well for Ciara, which is to do with it's just fascinating how many people said yes to the project, and how quickly word spread. And what do you think it is? Is it just the way you approach them? Do they
I think they were bored. I think they were bored. I think a lot of I feel like a lot of it was just the whole novelty of lockdown, because I started in middle of April last year, and I finished. The last shoot that I did was on the 30th, was as he started taking up the restrictions on the 31st of May, bit by bit, because I approached it as a journalist. So for me, the story was over by that point. It felt sort of it was done. But yeah, I obviously I shared stuff on. We've got a very active sort of social media, quite sort of social Facebook group in Levenshulme, which has got loads and loads of members. I don't know, 15,000, 20,000 members. So I think that was part of it. Sharing it with things like that. But people were just, I was getting like 20 messages a day some days, people wanting to have their photo taken. I guess it's like they were getting their portrait done for free. I was sending everyone a JPEG, I think that was a little bit of it as well. It's the novelty.
That's nice to hear. I mean, don't underestimate.
It's
obviously,
very refreshing.
Levenshulme has also a reputation of really pushing ahead with local support, and I know the RSA has done a paper about it, haven't they? Or somebody at the RSA has done a paper specifically about Levenshulme. Perhaps they actually live there, so
could be
because of its sort of pioneering
openness, localness.
Yeah.
But I think, there was another body of work being made at the same time in Levenshulme, and with another photographer who I know, also a female photographer, and she was doing doorstep pictures. And I think what I noticed was, and I think this is probably true of anywhere, to make it truly representative of a community, you have to go the extra mile. Because if you're just relying on people coming to you and volunteering themselves, it's only a certain cohort of the community that will do that, and it wouldn't end up, diverse in, and I'm not just talking sort of racial diversity, all sorts of diversity, because if you're recruiting through social media, of course, it's a certain age group of people. So yeah, it felt important to sort of get all different. So I went out shooting on Eid, for example. I organised in advance to go and, because people dress up for Eid, and it was a very strange Eid because it was lockdown, but some people were still doing it. So yeah, like little things like that I tried to think about.
Quickly to ask, is the book still available?
Yeah, I've got loads of them in my hall. Yeah. Yeah, it's £15. I've got a big cartel site which I'm selling it through.
Lovely, thank you. And then back to Brad and Kohinoor. Actually, there's a couple of questions for both of you, but I think only Brad can answer them unless you put it in the chat. Kohinoor, had you done any modelling before? You seem very relaxed and natural. And then why black and white, says one of the questions in the Q&A for Brad as well.
I think I can answer the modelling for Kohinoor. She's done a few modelling stuff at uni for friends and stuff, but I don't think professionally she has. But I agree, she is very relaxed and natural. Grade A model. And I chose black and white because I wanted the images to be more about the context of which we're in. We're stuck inside the house. It's more about the person and less about what she's wearing and less about the colours. As well, I felt like black and white was an aesthetically more pleasing look as well for the lighting chosen. Using all natural lighting, it just looks much nicer in my opinion.
Thank you so much. We've actually, unbelievably, out of time. It's just 1 minute to 4, so it's probably a good moment to...
There was one, can we just do one quick question for Becky?
Oh, yeah.
From Rosie. She just said she loved the project and how you'd been able to connect with people all over the world. Did you find that there were many limitations shooting portraits over video call, or was it refreshing to work in a completely different way from normal?
Cool. Yeah, it was quite interesting working online doing portraits. I think, yeah, they became probably more collaborative than kind of work I've done before. And so it just taught me quite a lot. Just literally just being able to focus on somebody's face really made me pay attention to like the light and how I could kind of, it really made me, not that I'm saying it very well now, but get better at my direction skills as well, and having to so I think I learned a lot from it as well, so it's quite refreshing.
It's such a
the lighting in them so beautifully done. Like, I find it hard to believe there wasn't a ton of intervention. You didn't shoot them or anything like that.
Window light.
It's just pure skill from Becky. I mean, yeah, seriously, it shows, and I think that is in a way, that's what we have as visual people. We can, and there's definitely been. Is it Vogue that's been doing remote cover shoots, but with the direction of the photographer? So it's I think that's a good thing for us photographers to know. We should wrap up because it is 4 o'clock. I just want to say a couple of very quick thank yous. First of all, thank you very much to all of our speakers, all 16 of them. Really interesting, lovely, warm, enjoyable, challenging projects. I loved each of them. Please do pop any kind of final comments and thanks if you've got in the chat to the speakers. It'd be great to see. Huge thank you to my colleagues. Thank you very much to Fuse. As in case you probably heard this earlier on, but Fuse is a relatively new network elevating the voices and the work of creatives of colour, based in Manchester, but now global. And it really is an amazing platform. So please spread the word, have a look at it. It's not just photography. There's a lot of other